Hello, this is Pat Lynch. Welcome to the Career Pathways Podcast. Today we have Dr. Wesley Perkins, a professor of math, associate professor?
Assistant professor.
Assistant professor. I never get those correct, but nevertheless, it's going to be a great conversation on mathematics. With me is my co-host,
Gavin.
And they're in the dark, but nevertheless ever present, the legendary producer Jayson. Say hello, producer Jayson.
Hello, and you can actually finally hear me. I have a microphone. This is my first time actually behind the board when we actually have the microphone, so I'm really excited.
And I'm questioning whether that's a good or bad thing.
Oh, it's going to be a terrible thing, but we're going to love it. So,
all right. Well, welcome, and hello, Wesley.
Hello.
Oh, man, I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be on here.
We always start with just a question learn about you.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like where you're from, kind of where you went to school, kind of what were all the things that led you to end up here at Lyon College as a professor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my family moved around a little bit when I was younger, but for most of my early years, I went to Brooklyn High School, and that's where I graduated from high school. Then, you may know I'm an alum from Lyon. After Brooklyn, I came here in 2011. I'm getting old.
Yeah.
And so came here in 2011, got my bachelor's degree here.
In mathematics?
In math.
All right.
I had a minor in computer science and physics, and I was 2 classes away from a minor in religion and philosophy. So I was really close to that one.
Okay. Oh, real good. And then graduate school, your doctoral program, where were they?
Yeah, so after Lyon, I went to the University of Kansas to get my PhD.
So you're
Loved
Jayhawk?
that. Yes, Rock Chalk.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And after there, I worked for a year at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, and then came back to Lyon.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. So is it Lyon changed from when you were a student to where it is today?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, when I was a student, we didn't have a football team.
Yep.
In general, the athletic department was a lot smaller. I think we had like volleyball, basketball, softball, baseball, soccer. That may have been it.
Right.
We didn't have archery or bowling or golf. We may have had golf, but that was a lot smaller. I mean, some of the buildings have been rebranded. Like the Mac was not the Mac back then.
Okay.
It was just called Morrow, and it was actually just filled to the brim with comfy couches and vending machines. So
there you go.
Like there weren't the computers or the student success center or anything
Salty
like
dog.
that.
Yeah.
There was no coffee shop on campus.
Yeah, I love it.
But also when I was a student here, the Union had just burned down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it burned down the year before I came here. And so we were eating out of the Temp. Like that's where the cafeteria was.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And that's why it's called the Temp. It was the temporary dining facility.
There we go.
Yeah. Did not know that. Yeah.
And you always knew when dinner was over because the bagpipers would come in and start playing. And it's like, okay, time to leave.
Well, it's kind of like the Oscars, It's like your acceptance speech is run over.
Right.
Oh, that is so great. Here at Lyon, what classes in mathematics do you teach?
I mean, I've taught, I think, 8 different math classes since I've been here at Lyon. I teach intermediate algebra. I've taught elementary functions, math for liberal arts, which is one that I really love, calculus 1, calculus 3, differential equations, and advanced calculus. So
it's a pretty wide range.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of everything from freshman to senior level math.
Excellent. Being that this is a career pathways podcast, we always ask our guest, as far as if a student at Lyon majors in mathematics, what career paths do they have?
Yeah.
What options are out there? Because I'm sure there's a lot of different ways they could go.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different things you can do with math. That's kind of one of those things that, there are a lot of common questions you get as a mathematician, like, well, what do you do all day? Do you just count to bigger numbers?
All right.
Like, what can you do with a math degree?
Well, just to, okay, I got to scrap that from my question set.
Right. Things like that, it's just one of those fields that there's to some extent mystery around. But I actually went to a math conference a little while ago and got this thing called the Big Career Interview Game.
Ooh.
And it has a lot of interview questions trying to help math majors get ready for the job market, right? And there's different cards in the game. These are just basically a bunch of different cards with possible careers for mathematicians. You've got a software engineer, a supply chain analyst. This one just says make your own job. A math technical writer, an actuary, is a popular one if you want to go into insurance. A manager, software engineer, a math curriculum coach, a financial planner, an art restoration consultant. That's interesting.
In mathematics.
Okay. If you talk to some of the artists around on campus, even they will talk about the importance of math, even in the field of art, and in understanding paint pigmentation and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But something that I was told when I was getting my PhD, I mean, outside of some of these great career things, is that a degree in math is really a degree in problem solving. And so if you want to get a math degree, you can really market yourself as a problem solver. And so you can go into a lot of different careers. Like I know a lot of people who go work for like AT&T or Google after they get a math degree, because it's like basically we are trained to like, hey, you give me any type of problem, I know how to think about it and attack it in different ways, right? It's not necessarily just like, oh, find X, find Y and this kind of stuff. The training is about how do you think? How do you approach different things that you've never encountered before? So a lot of critical thinking skills.
Well, that's really interesting. Kind of my life's been in business, and we always, business people kind of see themselves as problem solvers also. What's an example of as a mathematician in a say a business environment, how a mathematician would approach solving a problem?
I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah,
it kind of depends on what the problem is. The
pandemic. The pandemic. All of a sudden you had a complete supply chain disruption. So now it's what do we do to kind of fix things in the short term just to get everything moving along, and then in the long term, what is it that we can do to prevent this from happening again? And there would be the need for somebody with a mathematical mindset to.
I mean, I think it could definitely help with that. There's like in my particular field of mathematics, something people often study is like traffic flow with mathematics. And so I mean, that's part of supply, getting things from point A to point B, right? Now, that probably wasn't the problem per se during COVID and the pandemic because the roads weren't as occupied, but that transition of goods is definitely something a mathematician could study. Or, I mean, because part of the problem, at least to my understanding during COVID, was everyone had to quarantine, so people couldn't be in factories as much, producing the goods that were needed to go to the different places.
Oh, absolutely. Because predictive analytics, that's kind of, you hear that, and kind of ties to AI, and then a lot of that is just something like that. How do you predict how to kind of improve a particular supply chain process? I remember someone explained to me how they ship bananas from, like, say, Honduras to a grocery shelf at Walmart, and just how you need to pick them at a certain time, and it's all staged in terms of that. They can tell they will begin to ripen
by the time they get
and then just how do you go and really calculate that, and it's like, oh, okay, because last thing you need is to ripen somewhere on the ship over. Your cards, so what would be a math interview question?
I mean,
ooh,
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what would you ask someone who's a mathematician?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there are some that I sometimes see on YouTube that are, I think these are more meant for like math grad school. I think I've seen some from like Amazon or Google though, where it's like, here's this problem, can you solve it?
Right.
So those are going to be some of the types of questions you're going to get.
Is it like those famous Google questions that they always, it was kind of legendary about the Google interview process, that you are now shrunk down to the size of like an ant and put into a blender, and then the blades are going. How do you get yourself out? And it's like, oh, my head.
Right. I've not seen those.
Yeah.
Some of the ones I've seen online are more geometry and kind of spatial reasoning and things like that.
And or piano. Like how many piano tuners do you think are in the city of Chicago?
Right.
Okay. And then so it's more deductive reasoning.
Probably.
Yeah.
And just getting your logical thought process. So that's probably one brand of interview questions that you might face. Another one would be to the extent of like, so why do you think this is going to be pretty typical, but why do you think you're a good fit for this job, right? Like, what are you bringing as a mathematician to this job, like, that maybe other people aren't bringing, And so to me, that's where you would be like those critical thinking skills, that problem solving stuff. My dad was in insurance for most of his career. And, just the number of times I would hear him talk about how, someone would just point blank accept what the computer accepted, but he'd be like, wait, the math doesn't quite match with what reality has. And then, him finding the bugs in the computer program.
Wow.
Just because like he had that, he would pause and think like, so is this number reasonable?
Yeah.
Based on what the computer's spitting out at me.
We before the camera started rolling, we were talking about math phobia, and as an educator, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because you don't really hear social studies phobia, history phobia, but what is it about math that makes it just something that really concerns people, just gets them worried about, taking a math class?
That's a good question. And it's something that I've thought about really for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of layers to that response. One layer is essentially cultural views on math, and like even generational views on math, right? How often have you or anyone else, like, you come home with a math problem and you're like, hey, mom or dad, can you help me with this? And they're like, I'm not a math person, like I don't understand this. Or like, if you've ever seen The Incredibles 2, There's this famous scene whenever his son's asking him for help on math, and he's like, "They changed math. Like math is math. Like I don't understand what's going on here."
Right.
Right. So there's kind of this thing where kids are seeing their parents struggling with it, and the parents don't have confidence in their own abilities.
Yeah.
You know, they struggle with math, and so I think there is to some extent a generational
Right.
passing on of math anxiety, math phobia, because you know that's just what kids hear all the time of
Right.
like, I'm not a math person.
Right.
Well, is anybody like an English person when they're born, or an art person, or a history person?
Right.
Like, no one comes like is born like innately math,
Yeah.
right? But like that's just how people talk about it, even in the media, like
Yeah.
Incredibles or like a lot of other movies. It's not often presented in a good light. Like the one day you hear good things about math is Pi Day, and really that's just an excuse to eat pie. You know,
3.14162.
159.
Whoa. Non-mail. All right, there we go. I'm flunked the class.
So, just piggybacking off that, like,
Yeah.
how would you address, like, if a student came in, like, struggling with math? Say they were in
Yeah.
high school and they're, like you said, a math person,
Mhm.
and they came and it just, like, left them, and they struggled with the upper level.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
would you address that?
Absolutely.
Good question.
For me, a lot of it starts, I mean, with just empathy and sympathy, right? Just understanding like nobody takes a math class already knowing all the answers.
Mhm.
And this, I think, is where some of that math anxiety and phobia comes in of like, people don't like being wrong.
Yeah.
We don't like,
Right.
and
right.
so when you especially like go through high school or it's been a while and you're kind of coming into a math class, not sure what to expect, like there's a lot of nervousness and anxiety because it's like, I don't remember exactly all the rules or how it works or how to get there. And I don't want to be wrong. I don't want someone to think I'm stupid because I messed up on this, right?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, for me, a lot of it comes down to just being human and being relatable,
Yeah.
like letting students know, like, I mess up, I make mistakes, and that's okay. Like, the point of mistakes is not to avoid them, but to learn from them.
Mhm.
And math is no different than that.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's where it's got to start, that interpersonal relationship with the student, because like that is the place where confidence in math can start to be built. And once you kind of have that interpersonal relationship, I mean, just a lot of good reinforcement. Like
Mhm.
when students ask questions or when they make mistakes or anything like that, just encouraging them in that process. Because like, if you've ever seen The Magic School Bus, it has one of my favorite quotes in it, you know, like take chances, get messy, make mistakes.
Mhm.
Because like that's when you learn, that's when you grow.
Right.
And especially in math, it's got to be like, okay, so now I know that's not right. Let me encourage like and point people in the right direction and build that confidence, because that's what's missing in so many people
Mhm.
when it comes to that fear and that anxiety. Is it's just like I have absolutely nothing inside of me that is, I mean, it kind of gets at that what's the word, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm. Yeah,
is
yeah.
essentially like what we see in math a lot,
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, I'm an imposter, I'm not really that good at math. But no, it's just that building that confidence. I know I've said that word a lot, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So before like the camera started rolling, you talked about the history of mathematics. With AI being introduced, especially as young as it is right now, do you see like a shift in mathematics, or do you see like another, I don't know how to word it, but like historical change in how mathematics is taught, or what is all included in math now?
That's a really good question. There's definitely starting to be a shift in math. Math moves a little more slowly than other disciplines. Like the STEM disciplines tend to move very quickly. Math is
Mhm.
we're the tortoises, they're the hares. So,
Right.
but there is definitely a push to. I think there are some changes that need to happen, and some things that you kind of have to keep the same. Like with AI and ChatGPT and all that other stuff. Honestly, it's really terrible at math.
Yeah.
Like, you can, like, ChatGPT will say things like 2 equals 1 or 3 equals 7. Like, it's really not the best at math right now because it's a language model, not a math model.
It's designed that way because people who put the prompts into it, it learns from those prompts that people put into it. So if people are inherently bad at what they're putting into it, things going to be bad at outputting things to it.
Exactly.
It's why ChatGPT sounds so stupid now, because so many people put so many dumb, like language models into it that it just doesn't know how to compute anymore. It's losing its steam.
Yeah, I compare it to the Wikipedia now. How people can just go in and add whatever they want.
Exactly. Yeah. But professional mathematicians are starting to use AI tools to help them make advances in the field of mathematics, and there's that question between, like, essentially a tool-assisted proof and a paper and pen proof, something that we did, and kind of finding that balance, because AI can be good at detecting patterns that we aren't, but at the same time, like, you've got to trust what it finds, or you got to prove that what it finds is actually correct, So there's kind of this give and take with mathematics of, like, math is all about kind of if-then statements. If this is true, then what can you conclude? It's logic. So, like, so if the AI gives me this, then what can I conclude? Do I trust the AI fully in this process? So I definitely see a historical shift, but it's going to be a slow one, and that mathematicians in general will probably be divided on for the next few years.
Okay.
Yeah. With just kind of as somebody who does math research, as someone naive like me, it would be like, gosh, what more is there to, what new frontiers are there in math? Because it's like, I just think it's all been discovered, and I'm sure that's completely wrong. But what are, like, kind of the new things? Like, if you're going to go and do a research paper, do a conference presentation, kind of what areas do you explore in your research?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think part of that is even in how we teach math.
Yeah.
Like, we don't teach necessarily the history and development of math, the way that you would get in a chemistry class of, like, oh, so-and-so discovered hydrogen, so-and-so discovered helium. You learn the scientific process of how discoveries are made, whereas math, we just teach it. And I think this is one of the great tragedies, as, like, these rules that have existed forever, like, it's been figured out. Whereas, like, rather than teaching it as something to be discovered, like, why is this true? Yeah. Like, how do you think about this? And so there's a lot of new field, like, research areas in mathematics. I mean, to be honest, I don't think we'll ever have it all figured out. Right. Like, for me, I study predominantly periodic patterns. So patterns in nature that repeat themselves. So think like water waves, like waves crashing into the ocean. Like every 3 seconds, you're going to hear a wave.
Right.
So that's going to be something periodic. And kind of my question that I often ask is, like, so you see these patterns, how well do they handle imperfections? Because the world's not perfect.
Right.
And it's never going to be perfect. And so if you throw some imperfections at it that you're going to experience in the world and nature, how well does it handle those? If it can handle them well, it's like, oh yeah, I'm good with imperfections. It's stable. If it sees the imperfections and it freaks out and it falls apart, then it's not stable.
Kind of, you threw out, a couple, like, entertainment references. I'll throw one out. Jurassic Park. First one in the chaos theory.
Yes.
Explain that. What is chaos theory?
But before you go into explaining that, isn't the chaos theory, doesn't that correlate with the butterfly effect? Or no, there's two different things. That's what
I'm not entirely sure on that one.
Oh, okay.
That's something I'd have to look into. Chaos theory is something that is a relatively new field in math, to be honest. Yeah. Like, that's not something we understand very well because it's chaotic. There are some good books out there, but, like, just as an example of chaos, imagine a pendulum. it's pretty fixed, right? But now stick another pendulum on the bottom of it, and now you let both of them move. That's going to produce what's called chaos, because like we understand how this moves, but if you stick a second one on it, it's just going to move in completely unpredictable ways. Like, so that's a classic example of chaos, of basically like two pendulums, and then like it just falls apart. It loses its pattern.
College and by KILT Studios.
Essentially, my understanding of chaos is if you slightly change where you start it. So if instead of starting it here, I started it here, it would wildly change the behavior.
Right.
Whereas like with a regular pendulum, if I start here versus here, like the behavior is basically the same.
Yeah.
Whereas chaos, small changes lead into big, or small initial changes lead to big final changes.
I think that's where Gavin was getting confused, because the
'cause-
butterfly effect is time travel. So if you kill one small thing in the past, it will change the entire timeline, like a butterfly.
So it's like it also goes into the fact that like you said, one small change can lead to like a large abrupt disruption. It's like the theory says that the flap of a butterfly's wings could cause like a thunderstorm or like a tragic tsunami somewhere, like say Africa or somewhere on the coastline.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting like, I guess, confused. about.
I gotcha. That makes sense.
But we all, I guess, humans can kind of crave predictability, right? So then, how does chaos theory kind of explain the world that we live in? Is it just that are there things that just randomly happen that that things just don't always go as predicted, or
I mean, this is an article, I've not read it yet, but it's called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Math.
All right.
It's on my to-read list. I've not read it. But the heart of it is that math is actually really good at understanding the natural world, even with like all the chaos and things involved, right? Because like I said, it's not perfect. But math is really good at modeling what's going on, modeling like the weather, at modeling airflow. I mean, math is why we can fly airplanes from Little Rock to New York, right? It's good at understanding like how we communicate over the internet and video and stuff like that. Like math is actually why we're getting faster and faster internet, because we're understanding how to send information faster and faster and things like that. So those patterns are inherently, yes, there's chaos in the patterns, but the larger patterns can be modeled very well by rigid structures, because math is, all about patterns.
Can we circle back to math education?
Yeah.
A lot of math is a building one thing on top of another, and is part of it that where people have just this aversion towards math is that the foundation isn't set right. And with that, is there a way we can rethink math education to kind of just remove some of these barriers and just give people that confidence to continue? Because it's like, I didn't do well in this class, I'm now never going to do well in mathematics. I as an educator, how do you approach that? Because you high schoolers arrive here on campus, and I'm sure that's a mindset of many. And so then how do you get them back to a confidence and a foundation where they can succeed?
That's a really good question. I've never thought of it exactly in those terms before, because again, as you said, math builds on itself.
Yeah.
Right. It really does. And I mean, a lot of how math is thought and taught about is actually to some extent going to depend on where in the world you grow up. Like how we think and talk about math in the US is different than how it's talked about in Europe, for instance. But building that foundation, to me, it really requires someone who understands why the foundation is there.
Okay.
To me, I think teaching teachers is a lot of that.
Oh, are we going to go to the board?
Maybe.
Yes.
Right. Because if the teacher doesn't understand it, but just whenever a student asks a question, and this is the experience of most people with math.
Right.
You ask a teacher a question. So like, for instance, you're adding fractions, right? You've got like a half plus a third. Why do I need a common denominator to add those fractions? That's a common question.
Right.
Because like most people don't like fractions. Because I don't think the math behind them is often explained very well.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so we need a common denominator. Why? Because the teacher said so.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not really helpful. That doesn't build that foundation that helps students along the way. Or like, why if I do -1 times -2, why is that +2?
Right.
Why is a negative times a negative positive?
Yeah.
That's how it is.
It's just what a teacher told me. Right. But like, there's not that, again, that discovery process, that inquiry into learning of like, oh, I'm just told this way, so that's the way it is. And it's like the people who are good at memorizing the rules and following the rules,
Right.
They build the confidence in math with that, but it doesn't actually help, other students who it's just like, I want to understand how and why, not just here's an algorithm, follow it.
Okay.
It would. How do you approach that? Through visuals, or just kind of show what a half is, and then how you can add the two together?
I mean, it's really going to depend on what it is.
Yeah.
But when I teach, pretty much anytime I introduce a new topic, I try to relate it to other things of like, okay, so like, this. So like, how can I take what you know and build up to what I'm talking about now?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to think of an example that I might do in one of my classes. Let's say I'm doing, so like I want you to understand how exponents work, right? For instance, and trying to build some intuition on that. So 3 squared, we know like that exponent usually just means multiply it times itself.
Right.
Or if I had 3 to the 4th, it would multiply it times itself 4 times, right?
Right.
But what if I had 3 to the 0? How can you multiply a number by itself 0 times? That doesn't make sense, right? Well, this starts to get into some pattern recognition and building up to that intuition of like, so I could just tell you to memorize the fact that 3 to the 0 is 1.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's just a fact because I told you so, right? Or I could help you understand why that's true, right? So let's say I have 3 to the 6th divided by 3 to the 4th. And I want to understand what's going on there, right? Well, this says I would have 6 3s on top.
Right.
So, and this said I would have 4 3s on the bottom. Well, I know a number divided by itself is just 1, so I can cross out 4 of them. And how many am I left with? 2.
Yeah.
So that would leave me with 3 squared. And so we start to recognize this pattern of this number minus this number is going to give me that one, right?
Right.
And so in general, if I want to do like 3 squared over 3 squared, well, following this pattern, I just subtract the 2.
Right.
So that would be 3 to the 0. But what's anything divided by itself? It's 1.
Yeah.
And so understanding that like, oh, that 0 power actually gives me 1 for a reason, not just because I told you so, right? So that's kind of how I approach teaching in general. And I find that it really helps students see why and how and what's really going on, not just like that straight memorize.
Just straight memorization.
Exactly.
So what is your, like, as being a math professor and like showing your example, what is the most rewarding like aspect did you get? Like feedback from your students or just like being able to see your students grow? Like what is the most rewarding aspect of it?
I mean, I think those are two of the big ones, right? Really seeing students go from like, I'm not a math person to like building that confidence and engaging with it and enjoying it. And seeing those light bulb moments go off, right? And even helping them get interested in asking questions and not just accepting what I tell them point blank, like that I love. And then getting feedback at the end of the semester on the course evaluations, like hearing how students enjoyed my class or my enthusiasm and things like that. So those are definitely the most rewarding things, the things I love the most.
Dramatic change of subject.
Yeah.
You teach Bible study.
Yes.
Here at Lyon College. Can you kind of tell us, I guess, did you start the Bible study when you came back on campus and kind of how it developed, kind of what kind of student participation you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
When I was a student at Lyon, I was involved with a campus organization here called BCM, and it was a church group, and it was really through that group and through one of my chemistry professors at the time, who was a pastor and a chemistry teacher.
Okay,
and that I found my own faith and became a Christian. And it really transformed my life. Kind of before that, I was a pretty angry dude.
Yeah.
It just really flipped my world on its head, and for the better. I've really grown a lot since then. And so kind of since that moment, I've always enjoyed teaching about the Bible, learning about the Bible. As I said earlier, I almost had a minor in religion here at Lyon. I took a lot of the RPH classes, and I almost went to school for seminary.
Oh, wow.
Rather than to get a PhD in math. I was really not sure which one I wanted to do between the two of those. And like I said, kind of since then, I've been involved in various studies because I love teaching in general, whether it's math or the Bible. And so when I came back here, I wanted to be able to kind of reciprocate some of that stuff that helped me learn and grow so much as a student. And, so I started up this Bible study, and, I asked the chaplain if I could do that and things like that. And last year had a few students come around, and we looked at the book of Colossians and the Sermon on the Mount. And then this semester we've got about 12 students or so currently who are coming. So a lot of good questions and engagement, and we're looking at the book of Mark this semester. So
when students come to Bible study, is it to kind of strengthen their faith, renew their faith, just trying to just a discovery, just looking like you when when you were on campus, kind of what kind of what kind of students do you see, or is it? I'm probably guessing it's all of the above.
Yes, I was going to say yes. All of the above.
Yes.
People are just exploring, what their faith is, what they might believe in, all the way up to people who are solid Christians and really understand what the Bible is, and they're just trying to grow in that and understand the Bible at a deeper level. And so really kind of all things, and I want it to be open to all things, where people can just come and explore and ask questions, and not just have their questions kind of squashed.
Sure.
But they can really be, vulnerable.
Yeah.
Really.
Safe space.
It's a safe space to ask those big questions of like, so what do I think about this thing called life? And what do I believe in? And things like that.
Yeah. So. Well, I think that's probably as great a place to end this conversation,
No,
Wesley.
Hold on.
Wait. There's a wait. There's
voice. It's me.
Speak.
Trust me.
Yes, is that you, Morgan Freeman?
Oh. Today I'm gonna. No. Okay. So I got a question for you, and also this isn't just totally because I want to blow some more time into the podcast, but also I want to know. So sine, tan, and cos, right? This was a big thing that I learned in like 9th grade geometry, whatever, you know. And I've always wondered, okay, if it is possible to do without a calculator, why don't we get taught it? And if it is not possible, then, you know, then say it's not possible. Because it's always just been like, oh, you just press a button on the calculator. Is there a way to do it without the calculator?
Like sine, cosine, and tangent?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes and no.
Okay. That's what I was...
Yes, there are ways of approximating those functions without a calculator.
Back to the board.
Yes.
But
this is what I wanted all along.
So while I'm erasing and talking about this, back in the day, before calculators, they wouldn't have done this by hand either. Yeah. They would have used something called trig tables or log tables. You know, like that was basically a great big book with like telling you what they were for different values. And so that was essentially how it was done back in the day, because most people don't need to know how to do it by hand. So the common person would have either used a table. Nowadays, it's a calculator, right? But there are ways to approximate it with a polynomial. So let's say you want to understand what is sine of 1, for instance, without using a calculator, right? Well, you can show that sine of x is equal to, let's see if I can remember this, x minus x cubed over 6 plus x to the 5th over 120 minus x to the 7th over some big number. Plus blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so that's just a polynomial, right? And so you can actually calculate it by hand. So sine of 1 would be 1 minus a 6th plus 1 over 120 minus blah, blah, blah. And basically, you could probably just cut it off there and get a good enough approximation. And again, if you wanted to do it by hand, that's one way to do it. It's not necessarily practical. This is probably how most computers actually compute it, because it's really easy to do polynomials in a computer. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering because, like, you know, it's always just like, oh, you just press the button on the calculator, and it's like, but why? And they're like, well, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it's always been.
Yeah, we don't, for the most part, you don't see this polynomial expression for trig until you get to calculus. So that's where you really start to see, oh, well, it's really just a polynomial, right? And so I understand what these different powers are in dividing, and so I can understand what the trig function is, not just like, you know, it is what I told you. So, yeah.
Whoa. Well, great question. And from the voice from beyond. All right. Well, again, Wesley, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, this is great. And first time we've had somebody go to the board. So yeah. All right. And with that, this is Pat Lynch signing off on our another Career Pathways podcast. As always, I have been joined by
Gavin
and
producer Jayson.
Okay, and we always close with the question, where can you find the Career Pathways podcast?
You can find it on 99. This is good. You're going to love this one. Yeah. It's a number. It's a math number. 99.97% of platforms, the same number, the same percentage of germs that get killed by Germ-X.
Oh, nice.
There you are. heavily researched,
and
so we love to throw facts at our listeners. So again, thank you for listening to the Career Pathways podcast. We hope you join us next week and every other week from then. Take care, everyone. Bye.